Good morning and welcome to the SitRep for today, which is the 17th of July 2022. I'm Gads, it's Ragnarok Survival, and once again we're talking about stories that piqued my interest in the past 24 hours from the perspective of prepping, what we can do to better prepare for the uncertain future that is heading our way, barreling at us like a speeding train, although possibly the trains aren't speeding right now. Possibly the trains aren't even running. If you've been listening to my stories at all over the past couple of days, you'd know what I'm talking about. All right, so let's jump into it today. A few things that I want to talk about. I've given this a few days because I didn't want to talk about it, but today I'm going to open up this can of worms about nuclear weapons being used on the US of A, and in particular, public service announcements going out to New York. This came into my my news feed, and a few people sent me stuff about it a couple of days ago, and I was just like, this isn't real. This is someone having a piss take. I'm looking for the little watermark of Babylon B or something like that to show me that this is an absolute piss take, that someone's having a lend to me here, because this just can't be real. I could not wrap my monkey brain around this kind of PSA coming out in New York City. Like the fact that, they're saying, hey, nukes could go off and this is what you need to do about it. I mean, I grew up in the 80s, so I by extension, it wasn't really a threat here in Australia, but we were sort of getting a little bit of that duck and cover sort of stuff. Movies and things like that. We're still talking about nuclear weapons and the Cold War and blah, blah, blah. So, that shadow of nuclear war was always there when I was growing up, but not in any serious way. The fact that it's popped out now, it just, like I said, seemed like a piss take. When I actually watched the video, though, that was the real kicker for me. This information that they're putting out is irresponsibly wrong, irresponsibly bad. And it makes me think, like, why would you put this information out to people? What possible good could this be if somebody was to actually strike New York City with a nuclear weapon? You're going to give out the kind of information that you're putting out there, which is just move inside as quickly as possible, lock yourself down, and wait for media, like listen to the news and wait for us to tell you what's going to happen. Like, no, that is utterly incorrect. For starters, if somebody was to drop a nuke on New York City, then you'd be vaporized. There's no chance to do anything like move inside. Your first and only act would be to deatomize yourself and spread yourself over a wide distance and become one with the environment in a very literal sense. There is nothing else that you could do. There's nothing else you could possibly do. If you were within any of the boroughs, like let's say it was a very small, low-yield nuclear weapon used on Manhattan Island, the island itself, anyone on that island would be gone. Let's say you lived in the outskirts of Brooklyn, you'd probably still be gone. If not, you'd be so heavily irradiated that it wouldn't matter. The fireball that would ensue from that would probably eviscerate you, or at least burn you beyond recognition, and you'd be dead within minutes. Within probably the distance of outer New Jersey sort of area, so we're starting to get a bit further away now, the radiation levels would be so severe that you would die within minutes to days. Maybe you'd kick on for a few weeks, but radiation poisoning would then set in and you would probably die. So the fact that they're putting out PSAs of just like, hey, just lock down and wait for news reports, and then we'll tell you what to do, is just utterly insane. Not to mention that the side effect of a nuclear weapon would be an electronic magnetic pulse that would destroy all electronic equipment. So how the fuck are you going to listen to the news at that point? All right, so I've been saving that one up for a couple of days. I didn't want to talk about it because I was just bemused by the whole thing. I'm just like, what? Why? What possible good could come from them putting this out there? Does this actually make people feel better? Do people actually take in that information and go, oh, okay, well, at least our local state government is looking after us. The mayor of New York is looking after us. They've got our best intentions. Oh, their best intention is our well-being. That's what's on their mind. Yeah, if you're looking at that sort of stuff and thinking like the government's got your back in this situation by giving you this information, just like check your premise is all I can say. Check your premise. I think you're living in a very deluded state. The state of New York. That is the state of delusion that you're living in. Anyway, enough on that. Let's talk about other nuclear war. Tulsi Gabbard, who is a former congresswoman, has come out and said that what the current administration in the US is doing, everything that they're doing, what they're doing is actually driving the world into a nuclear war, and it is becoming more and more inevitable day by day. Tulsi Gabbard, you can think whatever you want of her. That's your personal opinion too. I have my own thoughts. Again, I'm an Australian, so I don't really give a fuck. I don't really give a shit about, like, in any real way, about the politics of the US. I care about it because I care about the politics of all the world and all countries. US probably more than most other countries in the world, because as the US goes, so does the rest of the world, and especially so does Australia, so does New Zealand. We seem to follow those guys pretty closely. But, you know, in a real way, the politics of the US don't necessarily affect the day-to-day of Australia. However, this sort of thing, this sort of information which Tulsi Gabbard is talking about does affect us all. If we're getting pushed into a nuclear war, and it's because of what Biden's administration is doing currently, then we should pay attention to that and maybe have some pushback against it. If you've ever listened to me before, you would probably get the understanding that I don't particularly agree with the direction that the current US government is taking in many, many different ways. And that also bleeds back to Australian government as well. In fact, if you've ever listened to me, you know I'm a libertarian. I hate government. So taxation is theft. Inflation is forgery. So everything that they're doing is about taking power away from individual human beings. And I believe in the exact opposite, in empowering us as individual human beings, in forcing the responsibility back onto us and us accepting that responsibility and becoming more self-reliant human beings. That's my belief. So anything like this, I'm always wary of. Anyway, back to Tulsi Gabbard. I actually do like Tulsi Gabbard. I like the cut of her jib. I like who she is and what she stands for. Not everything, not 100%. There's nobody that I 100% agree with in the world, really. Quite often, even myself, I don't 100% agree with, given enough time. But I do like a lot of the things that she comes out with and a lot of things that she says. And this is definitely one of them, that we're seeing this push towards a bigger picture. Or the bigger picture push here is that we're heading into a worse place. So worthwhile listening to, I think. What else is happening in the world of nuclear stuff? Japan plans to revive idle nuclear plants by winter. So Japan, again, yet another country that is suffering from energy crisis, energy shortages. So they're looking at opening up a few of their plants, because they shut down a whole bunch of their plants after the Fukushima disaster. And they just said, no, that's it. We stuffed up with nukes, with nuclear energy. We're shutting it all down. Now they're going, okay, maybe we're a little bit hasty on that. We're going to start to open some of them up. Very interesting times for nuclear energy that's happening in the world at the moment. Obviously, the EU last week came out and said nuclear energy is now green energy somehow. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I'm not against nuclear energy. It's just something that we need to be very wary of, or very, very smart in how we're actually utilizing it and our long-term thinking about it. So anyway, we're seeing a shift in that nuclear energy space at the moment. A lot of the EU countries, though, are still shifting away from it. Germany, I think, is going to have to bite the bullet at some stage and realize that they can't power their country off coal. And if they shut off the gas, or the gas is shut off from Russia, that they're going to have to find another way. France is tending away from nuclear energy, and they should possibly be doing the opposite right now. Who knows? Interesting times, though, so I like to put these sort of things up in front of everyone. Speaking of Germany, this was sent to me by one of my sources on Instagram. German dairy industry warning of collapse if not supplied with gas. So this gas isn't just going to mean people huddling around fires come wintertime. There's a whole knock-on effect, and big industry is one of the big users of natural gas. So this gas gets cut off and that's it. You're going to have problems. Well, this is one that's going to affect, in particular, the food industry. So the dairy industry within Germany has come out and said, hey, look, we're going to have real troubles unless you get that gas turned on ASAP. We're going to have huge power supply problems. All our large industry is built off electricity. So if we're not getting electricity in, if we're not getting things like gas in, if you're not getting coal to power plants or using nuclear energy, then there's going to be a lot of problems, a lot of shortages. This was sent in by the same person talking about copper shortages. Copper is pretty useful when it comes to green technologies as well. And if you've ever heard me talk about this before, the green technologies, if you start to really dig into green technologies that we have today, they're not all that green in particular. Like we have to dig up a lot of things. Lithium has to get dug up out of the ground for our lithium ion batteries. There's still a lot of products, cobalt, all these things that are not very good for the environment. We have to dig up out of the ground. Copper is another one. So copper is, to quote this article here from The Register, Brandon Vigarolo, writing for The Register here, said, copper is so central to transitioning from fossil fuels to sustainable energy, says a report from S&P Global, that worldwide demand is likely to double by 2035 from 25 million metric tons to 50. No matter the scenario, S&P said, it's unlikely the world will be able to meet it. That's talking about 2035. That's, we're fast forwarding 13 years into the future there, and they're already saying we're not going to be able to meet that goal. This, again, I just want to point out that green technologies, I think they're great. I love the idea of sustainable energy production, and we should be moving towards it. The idea that we can do it overnight is farcical. The idea that we can do it from the position that we're standing in with the energy sector that we have at the moment and the energy usage that we have at the moment is not true. It is not going to work. We can give it a crack. We can give it a red hot crack if we're willing to sacrifice a bunch of humans in order to do it. That's the moral question we basically got to ask. I'm not saying yes or no to either of those. I think human life toll is going to increase over the next couple of years anyway. But if I'm looking at the world, what we just did to our world, to our economic system, based on what essentially at the start was over 65s or really over 75-year-old people dying en masse, what we just did because of that to prevent that happening, the answer to me is no. The taste for human death is not there within our society. So this is what's going to happen. If we keep pushing in these green directions so forcibly, we're going to essentially be paying for that in human lives. So that's up to you, wherever you want to do that. Take the ride. Hey, how you going? From YouTube is saying, copper chain is good for your rain barrels in deterring bacteria growth. Yes, copper has a absolute huge amount of uses. Copper, I believe, is actually one of the most underutilized resources that we have on Earth at the moment. Especially when we look at, I just got a reminder that I'm getting on a plane tomorrow to go overseas for a number of weeks. Great. Thanks, calendar, for reminding me that. Just on that, by the way, this may be the last SitRep for a little bit of time because I'll be traveling over the next couple of days, and then I will not know exactly what my access to the internet will be for the next couple of weeks. I'm going to try as much as possible to, at least on one format, whether it be probably Instagram would be the path of least resistance, maybe it'll be YouTube. Maybe it'll be on Spotify or Stitcher with the podcast. I'm not sure what I will actually be able to put this information up as, but just as a fair warning, this may be the last decent one for a little while. So soak it up right now. Really get that in. Just breathe deep and get a whole heap of this in. Anyway, back onto copper. For cooking, for using in gardening purposes, there's a whole heap of uses for antibacterial purposes. Whole heap of things we can use copper for. There's a whole heap of old school, what would you call it? Old wives' tales. And actually the way I came across it is old farmers' tales. Old farmers, you'll see them walking around with those copper bracelets on. They swear by it for arthritis. People putting copper strips around gardens to keep slugs out. There's a whole heap of these stories and tales of what copper can do, especially if you start to look at things like using copper versus iron in our gardens, so for stakes and digging tools and things like that, and what the health effects downrange are for human beings. So further downstream, when we start to get buildups of iron in our body versus buildups of copper in our body, very interesting stuff. And so I recommend trying to have a look at that. I'm not going to go into it today, but it's very interesting, maybe even conspiratorial if I get my tinfoil hat or my copper foil hat on this morning and we talk about, isn't it interesting that you don't see copper used in tools anymore? You'll see iron tools. And what have been the health trends of our modern era? Badness. Take the ride. You're going to have so much to catch up on when you return that your brain may explode. We will miss you. Thank you very much. I'll miss you too. Absolutely send messages through to me. I'll be able to access internet. I'm not going to like a third world country or anything. I'm going to Scandinavia. So I'm hoping that I'll have access. I'll probably just have to get a SIM or something when I get there, and access to the interwebs. But just want to go up to that area of the world and just see what's happening there, because I like doing those sorts of things. All right, yep. So copper running out, copper shortage. People are blown away by this. All the modern technology that we have to send communications over the ether right now. Well, in Australia, we are still pretty reliant on copper wires to do it. This blows people's minds. There's all the fiber optics and things like that. And we've been rolling out more fiber optics, but a large chunk of the infrastructure within Australia is still copper wires, which does need to be replaced fairly frequently. So shortages in copper wires, this could cause issues more widespread than just green technologies as well. But that's a very interesting one, and it's worth keeping your eye on. I just finished the book. Where are we? Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. Anyone who's read that, copper mines, that's a big sort of subtext into that book there with Francisco. And if you don't know, if I'm just speaking gibberish right now, don't worry about it. Go read the book. All right, China has issued phosphate quotas to rein in fertilizer exports. So they've just said, hey, look, for this second half of 2022, which we're in already, here's the big deal about this. They released these quotas saying we're only going to send this much out now, like as of now. It's not like, hey, in the first half of 2023 or the second half of 2023, so prepare for it. It's like, oh, by the way, yep, it's only this much. And so countries are going to be scrambling to get this Chinese fertilizer out. So it's phosphate in particular. We all knew it was coming. Everyone knew it was coming. We just didn't know the kind of magnitude, I guess, to what it was coming. China, I believe, is one of the biggest exporters of phosphates in the world. If I can just find the information here. They put out 10 million tons. Well, they put out 10 million tons last year, which is about 30%. Of the world's need of fertilizer. Mainly, we're looking at countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. So, more issues for the subcontinent there that are going to be happening. I was talking to someone who's heading off to Sri Lanka this week, and I was actually training them on a course. And I said that this entire area is about to go down, like sort of collapse in. They were a little bit surprised by that. They're like, "Oh no, Sri Lanka's bad, but I think they'll bounce back out of it." And I was like, "Oh my, you normies, come on!" Like, I don't know what news you're reading, but it's clearly not the same shit as I'm reading. So 10 million tons is what China put out. That's 5 million per half. They put a quota at 3 million, so they've already curtailed it. It's about 60%. They've warned that it might be up to 50% that they're putting out. So that's a quarter of what they're putting out. So if I do my dumb man maths, a quarter down from 30% of the world's supply means that they're going from 30% of the world's supply going out there, then we should have 21%-ish. That's down to 21%. So 7% of the world's, or 7.5% of the world's supply just got wiped off, if my maths is correct. No, 7.86% of the world's supply just got curtailed instantaneously. India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, already hurting, already having mini food crises themselves. And think about this, India, on top of that, has said, hey, we're going to probably maybe fill in the shortfall for the world's food crisis at the moment. No, we're not. Yes, we are. No, we're not. This is definitely going to be another factor where they're going to say, no, actually, we're not. We're not going to do that. We can't feed ourselves. All right, let's talk about heat, weather effects. So UK has just released that they have put their first ever red warning out for extreme heat. People will die. That's not exactly the quote, but that's what they're saying, that it is a risk of life. But that's the first time they've ever gone to red. Yeah. In Australia in the summer, we call that Tuesday. But they're not used to it. Their infrastructure is not used to it. Their people aren't used to it. They're not acclimatized to it. So this is extreme heat event that's hammering them. We're seeing 45, 46, 47 degree days out in the Iberian Peninsula, which is Spain and Portugal in particular. Spain wildfires have just killed over 200 people. Insane. 237 people died in the country, with some regions reporting extreme temperatures as high as 45 degrees or 113 degrees Fahrenheit for those of you who want to adhere to the imperial system, or as I like to call it, the nonsensical system. Cameroon joins the country, the growing list of countries that are having civil unrest at the moment. So they are protesting fuel shortages, and it's getting worse. Where else we got? Sri Lanka again, Italy, Haiti. Why do I always get that name wrong? Haiti is having it. Panama was having it. Peru, I haven't heard any news coming out of Peru for a long time. I don't know what's going on there, but it doesn't seem good. So, as I said, civil unrest now is rippling throughout the world. It's going to get worse. We need to think about this as individuals. How do we best protect ourselves? If you live in a city, if you live in a built-up area, if you live in and around other human beings en masse, you need to start really thinking about this and planning for it. I'm looking over at some of my kits that I've been pulling apart because I'm going overseas. I'm looking at a series of different face masks, gas masks, things like that. And I'm wondering, should I take one? I'm going to be outside of city centers, but I'm going to obviously have to travel through city centers and get on public transport. Should I have one? Should I have access to these things? Let me know in the comments if you think that I should. I don't know why I threw that in. It sounded cool. I posted up a link to a video that was sent to me by somebody. So it's in my stories. It should still be in there if you want to check it out. Talking about a top economist who's warned Australia could spiral into civil unrest like Sri Lanka. I agree. We could. This could definitely happen. Inflation needs to come under control. Australia's alleged 5.1% inflation is far lower than Sri Lanka's 45%. However, Sri Lanka was at 6.1 just over a year ago. So they've gone from 6.1 to 45.3. We're at 5.1. Oh, shit. We're at 5.1. No, we're not. We're like I've said this a couple of times. We're somewhere between, in Australia, my belief is 13 to probably 18, 19% inflation, real inflation. That's what we're at. Official data says 5.1. Don't believe that. Take the Ride says, yes, take a mask. Better to be prepared than unprepared. Okay, thank you. I'll do that. I will do it. I'll take the mask. I just got to decide whether I want to take a full face one, a half mask, or just some cloth type masks. But thanks for the interaction, by the way. Take the Ride. I appreciate it. So Australia, are we looking down the barrel? It's potential. I always say this. There is the potential there. There's always the potential there. There's a difference between potential and probable. So possible and probable are two different things. Possible is always there, but we are shifting towards probability right now. We are shifting towards civil unrest within Australia. Mark my words on it. It's getting closer and closer. All right, let's jump over into the US now, because this I found very interesting. This is probably the last bit of story that I'll talk about, and it's more in the zone of corruption. Secession from the US better than being forced to stay together, from Trump voters. I'm gonna read this story out, and then I want you to think about where I got this story from. Many residents of Republican-controlled states who voted for former President Donald Trump in 2020 believe they would be better off if their state seceded from the US, a new poll has revealed. About 33% of Trump voters in so-called red states say they'd personally fare better if their state became an independent country, according to a Yahoo YouGov poll. That's compared with 29% who believe they'd be worse off after secession. So 33 say, yes, we'd be better off. 29 say, no, we would not be better off. And then the rest in the middle are just like, stuff and things. I don't know. Now, this I got from, have a guess where? Anyone takers? This I got from Russian propaganda. This was from RT News. Now, I was talking to someone the other day how we are at war, and we have been at a state of war for years now. It's just that we don't define war the correct way in the West. We think war is shooting guns. We think like, oh, we're in an almost war with Russia right now. No, we've been at war with Russia in the West for a number of years. We've been at war with China for a number of years, because those two are fighting a war that we refuse to look at. It's unrestricted warfare. It is not contained within a battle space. It is not contained within geographical locations. It is everywhere. It is in cyberspace, and it is in our news cycle like this. Why would Russian propaganda want to all of a sudden exacerbate things within the US that show how fractious they are? Because people read this and go, whoa, it is more fractious. I need to pick a side now. This kind of information has been getting pumped out for ages. And this is the kind of stuff we need to look at. This is why I always say you need to be very critical of the information that you take in. Take in as much information as you can. Be critical of all of it. Look at where you're getting it from. Look at what their goal is, what they're trying to achieve by sending this information out. Think about how that would affect you if you just read that information. Because if I just read that, I'll be like, ooh, US is heading towards civil war, definitely. Oh, God. Yeah, secession. They're talking about it now. Well, no, maybe they're not actually talking about it. Russians are talking about it, and they want people to talk about it. They want a fractured enemy. They want us to be fractured. They're going to highlight the minutiae of difference in our societies. And we have been eating it up for years. We have been like, it's all the hashtag Me Too and Black Lives Matter and all these sorts of things. Yeah, social justice things are important, okay? It's we need a good working society, but these things shouldn't be seen as things where we're colliding. These should be seen as things that we are discussing and we are moving through at the moment as a coherent society. If we don't, we're going to be much worse off. So, also, just after I read this story, I saw this one pop up, and I just thought, this is great. This is really great. Now, this one's actually from Zero Hedge. It's not from propaganda, but it was in a number of different sources that I actually saw this. Nancy Pelosi, everyone's favorite gangster criminal politician, Speaker of the House, urges support of a $50 billion bill, which is built around chips. They've got to secure these chips. We've got to build our own chips. Forget Taiwan doing it. We got to do it ourselves. By the way, just as a side note, if the US does ramp up their chip making ability, I can guarantee you when China does eventually move on Taiwan, if US has the ability to make those chips that are currently being made in Taiwan, I cannot see US moving against China at all. That's just watch that space. It's not a guarantee. It's not an ironclad guarantee, but I just think this is interesting, and I can see this playing out. If China moves before, and China will have full knowledge of this, and that this is probably one of the reasons why they're not moving. If China moved before US had its own ability to create computer chips, to create silicon chips, then on a large scale, then US had come in. They need that. They know that this is a weak point, a vulnerability in the world. If the US does have the ability within their own country, China moves in on Taiwan, then the impetus to the US at that point has actually shifted. They go, oh, that could curtail the actual output from Taiwan, which could increase our market share now. Anyway, Nancy Pelosi, the reptilian overlord, the snake that is very loosely dressed in human skin, has come out and urged that we get this bill across the line. Okay, this CHIPS bill, $50 billion it's worth. Side note, not related at all, her husband, hours before she came out and said, we got to get this bill across, just a couple of hours before, just happened to buy an $8 million stake in NVIDIA. NVIDIA, any of you gamers out there would understand what NVIDIA is. NVIDIA is a very big, large company that makes computer internal parts like chips. NVIDIA is actually one of the ones who is leading the tender here to raise the American ability to create these chips. Now, why would you have a fractious society when you've got this kind of level of corruption at the top? I don't know how this continues. I don't know how this is allowed to continue. This is clearly insider trading. Any of us did anything of any scale, anything like this, and you and I would be thrown in jail 100%. But it happens here. No repercussions at all. Anyway, these kind of people, they need that money. Like Epstein's Island is gone, so they've got to find some other way to funnel stolen children into their sex dens, I guess. So, all right, that's the last thing. I've just been banned from Instagram and YouTube. Good night. Goodbye, everyone. That was the bit too far. No, I'm taking the tinfoil hat off right now. I'm just saying this is just out and out corruption, and there's no way we should stand for this. But this is another thing, like I like to highlight how incompetent and how corrupt our governments are, and that we should never put our trust in them. We should never put our faith in them. These people do not have our best interests at heart. They never have, or at least not in my lifetime. We need to take control of our own systems. We need to take control of our own financial situation. We need to take control of our own land, our own food system, our own water supplies, and our own security. We need to become more self-reliant human beings, and we need to do it with, I'll actually put this in here for once, a little bit of urgency now. I've been talking about this stuff for years, and I usually say, look, don't stress about it. I'm not here about doom and gloom. The world is, it's constantly in a state of change. Don't freak out about it. Just continue doing what you're doing. And yes, you should continue doing what you're doing. You should continue to do what you're doing in whatever speed and capacity you have to prepare for hard times. However, I would also say you should start to gear your mind up towards the inevitability that the system that we have right now will not last, and that it's changing over could be very rapid and very painful for a lot of human beings, for the majority of the human beings on Earth right now. So we need to really band together. We need to come together as a community. We need to encourage each other. We need to keep pushing together and forming a stronger, tighter community. Keep becoming more self-reliant human beings, and self-reliant human beings together. So we build the reliance within our own system. All right, that's me. That's me for today. I want to thank you very much for joining me. I want to say that I appreciate each and every one of you. for jumping in here, because it tells me the fact that you want to listen to this sort of stuff and that you've made it to this point in my rants tells me that you are the kind of human being that does want to prepare for the future, or as I like to call us, sane, rational human beings. Because there's always going to be something that goes wrong. There's always going to be something that disrupts the smooth sailing of our lives. So preparing for that inevitability is just prudent. So you, as a sane, rational human being, I want to say thank you very much for all the effort that you're doing. Keep doing it. Keep prepping. Keep getting out in the gardens. Keep growing our own food. We've got to keep doing that. Keep storing up the food. There's still food on the shelves. We're still in a rich, abundant country right now. We can still keep doing that. So I don't know when the next one of these will be, but hopefully I'll get one up soon. I'll try and get at least some stories and stuff up that I can. Thank you. I will have a great trip. Thank you, Maney. Zero, thanks, Oz Farm Living. Yeah, I'll try and get some information up as soon as I can. If I've got time in between packing and splitting wood and getting things ready for the home before I leave, I'm going to try and shoot some videos around emergency bags and grab bags and stuff today and post them up in the next week or two. But apart from that, stay safe out there. Keep your eyes open. Keep prepping, and Semper Paratus.